Following the final day of the week-long hearings, National Transportation Safety Board Chairman Jim Hall took questions from the press. Here's that 15-minute news conference.
All right, we'll have a brief question and answer period. Mr. Jim Hall, Chairman of the NTSB, will be conducting it. He'll be joined on stage by Dr. Bernard Loeb, Dr. Vern Ellingstedt, the investigator in charge, Al Dickinson, and the Deputy Director of Aviation, Mr. Tom Howder. I say we'll take about a 5 or 10 minute session to answer some of your questions.
Well, first, let me thank the media for your presence in covering this hearing. And it's been a long week, and I really appreciate the attention that you have given to the proceedings and the responsible way in which you have reported the actions that took place here this week. Be glad to open it up for any questions.
Yes, I was wondering if you could explain what components or systems are still being subjected to tests or investigation at this point to determine a probable cause.
Well, I'll ask Dr. Loeb and Dr. Ellingstedt to respond to that.
Well, obviously, as you just heard, there is an awful lot of work that we believe that still needs to be done. There's a lot of fuel testing work that needs to be done. We have more explosion testing to do, and we need to vary the fuels. We probably need to look at JP5, which we have not yet done. Beyond that, we're going to need to look into some of the structural aspects of the breakup, which have not yet been done in terms of computer modeling.
Well, that's correct, that we do have an extensive amount of computer modeling and the quarter scale explosion testing to do, and obviously, as Mr. Swaim had indicated yesterday, we still have many miles of wire to sort through.
Mr. Hall,
yeah, as Mr. Swain said, we're going to look for the needle in the haystack and go back over the 150 miles of wire that are there in the Calverton hangar and see if that they show any evidence of arcing or other information that might lead us in a direction. Yes, sir, and then we'll go right here.
Yes, sir. Mr. Hall, do you have any feeling that the sense of urgency you feel, or have transmitted anyway, on the fuel prevention solutions that you've listed, a number of them, is not shared by the FAA or the other industry? Are they going to get done fast enough to satisfy you?
Well, I feel that as a result of this hearing that I can now feel satisfied that the FAA and the industry are going to move forward at a pace that I think the American people would expect. Yes, sir.
A lot of new problems were identified throughout these hearings. Should the American public be more worried after these hearings, or should they be encouraged that the problems have been identified?
Well, the National Transportation Safety Board has been investigating aviation accidents as well as all major transportation accidents for 30 years. As I pointed out in my opening statement, this is our 121st public hearing. This process has served the American public very well, and we have one of the safest transportation systems in the world. So I would hope that the American people would look at the positive aspects of what they have seen this week. Obviously, it's up to each individual to make their own determination. Yes, sir.
Mr. Chairman, it seems that the age of an aircraft and possibly the maintenance record may have some bearing in this investigation. it is impossible for the traveling public to know the age and maintenance record of an aircraft when they board it. Don't you feel that the public should have access to that if they wanted?
Well, I've always felt that that any information the public pays for through their tax dollars should be available to the public, and it needs to be put together in a responsible fashion so that it's used in a responsible way. But I think the FAA is looking at providing additional information, and Senator McCain, Senator Wyden, and others, Chairman Duncan in the House, others are looking at ways that the large amount of information the FAA has can be put out so that consumers, in this case, would have more information in regard to the aircraft and the airline.
Mr. Hall, one of the purposes you said of the hearing was to help maintain public confidence, and that the hearing had divulged all the information in the record, but there was still no information on the witnesses whose testimonies, whose reports still conflict. What extent can you restore public confidence when you still have, running around at the edges, people talking about bomb and missile, people talking about conflicting witness statements, and conspicuously absent from this proceeding was analysis by aviation professionals of how these witness statements fit together and what they mean?
Well, first of all, let me say I have total confidence in the Federal Bureau of Investigation and its Director, Louis Freeh, and Mr. Kallstrom, and all the individuals with the FBI, the men and women who serve this country day in and day out, and the work they did on this investigation. They had requested through a letter, which is part of the record, that the what's the word I'm looking for here, the witness testimonies not be made part of this because of the possibility of an ongoing criminal investigation, and I certainly respected that. What we tried to do at this hearing was to be sure that the American people had fully demonstrated to them all the work that had been done by the National Transportation Safety Board as part of our investigation. And the criminal investigation, I think the FBI spoke to earlier last month, and that information, of course, was made available to the public. Let me say that both of us, and you heard testimony here this week, tens of individuals who are very expert individuals from numerous federal agencies and private contractors have looked at that wreckage, and there's no evidence of bomb or missile damage on that wreckage. Yes, sir.
Why did you permit TWA to continue with the part?
Well, I was very concerned about the situation involving the theft of the wreckage out of the hangar. It is unprecedented since I've been chairman of the board, but I was assured by the chief executive officer of TWA that they were going to look into the matter, and that in his knowledge it was isolated to the two individuals that have been identified. If for any reason we find that there is a broader reason to be concerned about it, I would reconsider my action, but I was reassured of that by the CEO of TWA. Yes, sir.
1 year ago tomorrow, you made recommendations that we've talked about. You studied those over the past year. Which of those recommendations do you think are probably the most feasible? Which do you think maybe perhaps they won't work as well? Which do you see as long-term? Which do you see as short-term? And secondly, what recommendations generically can we look for, or specifically look for in the future?
Were you paying attention this week? I'll let my technical experts speak on that. I think what we did learn in layman's language is that these explosive vapors in the tank are much more volatile than previously thought, and that to solve that problem long term is a result, which we have seen here, a change in the philosophy of both the FAA and the industry as how they treat explosive vapors. that's most welcome, and that's going to take a long time to address. By a long time, I mean probably several years. So I think it's still appropriate that the FAA and Boeing look at short-term measures to reassure the American public, and our recommendations still stand, and we may have additional recommendations as a result of this hearing.
Well, you see, a couple more.
Yeah.
If I could follow up on that, I mean.
Well, let's let this gentleman, and then we'll take about 2 or 3 more, and then, yes.
Mr. Hall, it seems that some family members have resigned themselves to the fact that they may never know what brought this airplane down. I know you're determined to find a cause, but will a real measure of the success of this effort be the speed with which the FAA and the industry adopts these safety regulations?
Well, I told the family members when I spoke with them the first night that I thought there were 2 things that they could look to. Number one is that through the leadership of Chairman Duncan and Senator McCain and President Clinton and Vice President Gore, the Family Assistance Act was passed, and a lot of that was because of the attention that families received as part of the TWA accident. So a lot of the things that were not done well in the past in terms of being sure, as we do with a hurricane or a tornado, that the resources of the government are there to help people, particularly in times of tragedy and distress, that now the NTSB has a responsibility to coordinate those resources.
Some of the suggestions we've heard this week seem like they could be implemented rather quickly. What does take so long? You mentioned it may take years to make changes. What takes so long in aviation?
Well, I'm going to meet with Ms. Garvey on Wednesday of next week to review all of she has requested to come in and review all of the outstanding recommendations that the NTSB has with the FAA. I'm very hopeful with the leadership of Jane Garvey and Secretary Slater that we're going to make progress in this area, and that we won't see the periods of time pass between industry action, government action, and these accidents that we've seen in both the TWA and Value Jet accidents. Yes, sir.
What about the NTSB's own transcripts of its own interviews with eyewitnesses who claim they saw a missile? These transcripts presumably are not covered by the FBI.
That's part of the public docket. Anything that we did is part of the public docket, and that would be made available.
Why weren't they discussed in these hearings?
Well, again, because we did not do, in many cases, the original interviews. The original interviews were done by the FBI.
I'm talking about interviews that the NTSB itself did. Mr. Wiemeyer's Operations and Witness Group did interviews with witnesses themselves by telephone. Why weren't those included?
Well, I'll let Dr. Loeb comment on it.
Quite frankly, because we didn't think they were pertinent to the intent of this hearing, and that they were going to be made available in the public docket so that there would be full public disclosure. Those witness interviews, I believe, when they're read and when they're seen, it'll be understood that the contribution of them to the discussions that took place in this hearing were simply really not that relevant.
How did you come to that decision that they were not pertinent?
That's what we do for a living.
Yes, sir.
Mr. Hall, have you?
And then I think we have a question over here, and then we'll take about 2 more, and then...
You sounded pretty enthusiastic about the foam suggestion and the testing, asking for the testing from the FAA. Could you tell us, that was inferred, could you tell us about your enthusiasm? It seemed pretty obvious, but I'd like to hear from you.
Well, you know, I'm enthusiastic that they explore all of these possibilities, the foam arrestor system, the inert gases, the possibility of, through new technology, to take electrical sources out of the tank entirely. The new fuel that they're looking at is the possibility of going from JP4 to JP5. I'm very encouraged about all those things because I think, you know, we've said all along the 747 is a very safe plane. Fuel-air accidents are very rare. But as we saw with TWA 800, they can be tremendous tragedies when they happen, and we all have a responsibility to the American people and the traveling public to do everything we can to prevent them from happening, particularly once we have all the information gathered that we've gathered through this investigation. Yes, sir.
As the chief agency accident investigator, is not the NTSB ultimately responsible for the FBI's work also?
Not in this situation. Normally, in most situations, normally either the National Transportation Safety Board or the FBI is the lead agency. The way it normally works is if we get to an accident site and we find evidence of a criminal act, we will turn that information over and the FBI would come in and we would support their investigation. In this situation, because it has been unclear for so long, you had essentially two parallel investigations running at the same time. We said all along, Mr. Kallstrom, Vice Chairman Francis, and myself, that we were looking at a bomb, a missile, or a mechanical event. The bomb and missile was the FBI's part of the investigation. The mechanical event is the National Transportation Safety Board's responsibility. One more question. Yes, sir.
Brought out during this week of what things brought out during the course of this 5-day hearing do you think will have the most benefit in the ongoing investigation?
Well, in the ongoing investigation, I think the most encouraging thing here is I see a change of attitude on the part of the FAA and Boeing, and that's the most encouraging thing to the chairman. I want to again thank all of you all very much for being here. You've been very attentive, and I've read numerous stories, and it seems to me that the hearing has been well reported to the American people. Again, I thank C-SPAN for making this available gavel to gavel. I think it's the first time I'm aware that we've had one of our hearings on, so all the American people can watch the work of this agency. So thank you very much.
Mr. Hall, is there one more question we get in on aging aircraft?